Hello, today we're going to see Mrs. Dalloway, a novel by Virginia Woolf. She had a very difficult life. Many members of her family died. She suffered a mental breakdown and she attempted to take her life, committed suicide at that time. Now, after the First World War, Virginia Woolf tried to find a style that could reflect the chaos and security of post-war England, and also probably the insecurity, the chaos inside herself. And this was typical of modernism. Now, on the one hand, she had to struggle to cope with her mental illness. On the other side, she had a very intense social life and she wrote several novels. In 1941, she committed suicide. Why? Here are some images from the film The Hours. This is the beginning of the film when Virginia Woolf is writing her final letter to her husband, explaining the reason of her act. She's writing that now she believes she's going to be mad again, and she keeps on hearing voices in her head, and this makes her impossible to concentrate on the writing. And so she puts some stones into a pocket and she drowned herself in a river near her house. Now, when she published in 1925 Mrs. Dalloway, her novel was, of course, an experimental novel, also because she tried to represent in her writing what was called the stream of consciousness. That is different for every person. Every person has in his or her mind a different way to process ideas, feelings, and so on. Now, the most important thing is not what happens, the plot, the actions, but what happens in the mind of the characters. In a way, this is not the story of a character. It's a story of more than one character, of what happens inside themselves during the day. How to represent the stream of consciousness. Also, the same way as Joyce, she used the so-called free indirect speech. In this way, she had a certain liberty in reporting what the words in the minds of the characters. And it's very important in her style is an abundance of auditory and visual impressions, sounds and things she sees, they see. She had a bipolar disorder, that is, she moved from extreme euphoric, positive moments in the life to very depressing ones, very sad ones. One of the two protagonists of Mrs. Dalloway, Septimus, he shares something with the writer, with Virginia Woolf. Also, this man, he has voices, and eventually, at the end, he commits suicide. In the passage we're going to analyze today, there are three main characters. One is Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa. The other is Septimus Warren Smith, young man, and his wife, Lucrezia. Clarissa Dalloway is a very refined person. She has a particular attitude towards introspection, and she feels a lot. She feels quite deeply emotion. On the other hand, she keeps all these inside herself, because outside she has to show a face of respectability. But she keeps all these inside herself, because in a way she has to show outside a facade of respectability, being reserved. Septimus is a young man who had just come back from First World War, where he suffered a post-traumatic stress due to the bombs, the shellings in the trenches. Also, Septimus has a problem to communicate to the outside what he feels inside himself. In a way, we can say that Clarissa and Septimus are a double, because in many ways, Septimus is the one who has hallucinations, hear voice. He belongs to the working class, to the lower class of society, while Clarissa belongs to the higher level of society, fine, well educated, and she doesn't appear to have any mental problem. So, in a way, when Virginia Woolf created these two characters, he attributed to Clarissa the role of speaking the truth, the sane truth, and to Septimus to express the insane truth of a person with mental problems. But that is always, can be also that, a truth, something you have to consider. We're going to listen to what happens to the protagonist, MrsDalloway, when she enters a florist shop, when she sees the flowers. Now, here there is a slideshow that shows you all the different flowers she sees in the shop, their colors. And so let's imagine her experience when she sees all the flowers and she's lost in their colors, in their fragrance, the perfumes.
"Nonsense, nonsense," she cried to herself, pushing through the swing doors of Mulberry's the florist's. She advanced, light, tall, very upright, to be greeted at once by button-faced Miss Pym, whose hands were always bright red, as if they had been stood in cold water with the flowers. There were flowers, delphiniums, sweet peas, bunches of lilac, and carnations, masses of carnations. There were roses, there were irises. Ah, yes. So she breathed in the earthy garden sweet smell as she stood talking to Miss Pym, who owed her help, and thought her kind, for kind she had been years ago. Very kind, but she looked older this year, turning her head from side to side among the irises and roses and nodding tufts of lilac with her eyes half closed, snuffing in, after the street uproar, the delicious scent, the exquisite coolness. And then, opening her eyes, how fresh, like frilled linen cleaned from a laundry laid in wicker trays, the roses looked, and dark and prim the red carnations, holding their heads up, and all the sweet peas spreading in their bowls, tinged violet, snow-white, pale, as if it were the evening, and girls in muslin frocks came out to pick sweet peas and roses after the superb summer's day, with its almost blue-black sky, its delphiniums, its carnations, its arum lilies, was over. And it was the moment between 6 and 7 when every flower, roses, carnations, irises, lilac, glows, white, violet, red, deep orange. Every flower seems to burn by itself, softly, purely in the misty beds. And how she loved the grey-white moths spinning in and out, over the jerry pie, over the evening primroses. And as she began to go with Miss Pym from jar to jar, choosing, "Nonsense, Nonsense, she said to herself, more and more gently, as if this beauty, this scent, this colour, and Miss Pym, liking her, trusting her, were a wave which she let flow over her and surmount that hatred, that monster, surmount it all, and it lifted her up and up when, oh, a pistol shot in the street outside.
When Clarissa enters the shop, she's still thinking about a problem, something that was really disappointing. Her daughter was studying at university, and she just started an affair with a professor at university. Clarissa thinks this is not appropriate for the difference of age and so on. And so when she enters the shop, she's still repeating to herself, nonsense, nonsense, that has no meaning, is not right. She enters the shop, imagine this typical British lady, refined, tall, straight, and she greets the florist, Miss Pym. Now there is an intense emotional moment, because imagine you are walking, thinking about your problems, and then you enter this place, a special place, this shop, and it's completely different. There are colors, perfumes, and so here there is a list of all the flowers and what they remind her of, what she feels when she walks along them, the shops with all those flowers. Notice that the names of the flowers are repeated. So they create a rhythm, a musical pattern. Delphiniums, sweet peas, lilac, carnations, masses of carnations, roses, irises, and here there are two physical sensations that are quite intense. One is visual. She sees all the flowers, and two, she's smelling the scent of the flowers. And also there is a tactile sense, because she feels the coolness of the atmosphere. Of course, flowers need a low temperature to remain in good condition. At this moment, flowers trigger her memory, and she now uses some simile to compare what she sees now, those flowers, to some other images. For example, now when you are in front of an intense scene, sometimes to concentrate you need to almost close your eyes, because if you keep your eyes open you can lose the concentration. So now she's looking at the flowers, her eyes are almost closed, and she imagines those flowers to be like linen clean from the laundry. After you wash clothes, you have to dry them on a string, and they are also in a basket ready to be hanged. The carnations with their heads up, and then the sweet peas with all the different colors. They were like a girl with their frocks, their clothes in a summer day, and then she plays with the colors. Roses, white, violet, red, deep orange. Every flower was softly, purely pressing itself. So we can say that at this moment she's completely lost. She has forgotten about her daughter, about her life, and she's just experiencing this intense visual, auditory and tactile moment. And now, the nonsense of before is almost far away. And at this moment, there is a loud sound, like a pistol shot from the street outside. And this is the end of this first intense moment. Now, the scene will continue outside the shop.
Dear, those motor cars, said Miss Pym, going to the window to look, and coming back and smiling apologetically with her hands full of sweet peas, as if those motor cars, those tyres of motor cars, were all her fault. The violent explosion which made Mrs. Dalloway jump and Miss Pym go to the window and apologize came from a motor car which had drawn to the side of the pavement precisely opposite Mulberry's shop window. Passers-by, who of course stopped and stared, had just time to see a face of the greatest importance against the dove-grey upholstery, before a male hand drew the blind, and there was nothing to be seen except a square of dove grey. Yet rumours were at once in circulation, from the middle of Bond Street to Oxford Street on one side, to Atkinson's scent shop on the other, passing invisibly, inaudibly, like a cloud, swift, veil-like upon hills, falling indeed, with something of a cloud's sudden sobriety and stillness, upon faces which a second before had been utterly disorderly. But now mystery had brushed them with her wing. They had heard the voice of authority. The spirit of religion was abroad, with her eyes bandaged tight and her lips gaping wide. But nobody knew whose face had been seen. Was it the Prince of Wales, the Queen's, the Prime Minister's? Whose face was it? Nobody knew. Edgar J. Watkiss, with his roll of lead piping round his arm, said audibly, humorously of course, "The Prime Minister's car."
In the 20s, motor cars were not so common as today. And sometimes, as you know, the carburetor probably creates some gases, and there is like a shot from the exhaust pipe. And so they heard this shot was not a pistol shot, it was a loud noise created by a car. And so when Mrs. Dalloway and Miss Pym heard the sound, they went, of course, naturally to the window, and now there is a car outside the shop. Those who are passing by, the passers-by, stopped, of course, because of the sound. And because the car was a very expensive one, they believed, a very refined one, they believed that someone very important was inside. And for a moment they saw somebody, the hand of a person, and then the blinds obscured the wind, and so they could not see who was inside. At this point, something very curious starts happening. Rumors. People began to gossip. Imagine along Bond Street, Oxford Street, two very important, even today, shopping area, full of people. The gossip began from the area around the car, and then after one person after the other, they began to spread their opinion about who was inside the car. And they felt also themselves important, because if you are close to a person of such relevance, you may feel as important as well, could feel under the wing of their authority. But who was there? They started guessing. The Prince of Wales, the Queen's, nobody knew. And here there is a contrast. We have been talking about refined people like Mrs. Dalloway, or probably the person inside the car. And now there is a plumber. He fixes toilets and bathrooms. He expresses opinion with the typical Cockney accent, the accent of the lower classes, saying in his opinion it was the car of the Prime Minister. Hundreds of people were persuaded that somebody very important, maybe the Queen, was inside the car. How did it happen? Nobody knew. It was just gossip, a rumor. But the rumor became almost a fact. So people believed, hundreds of people who had no facts experience, no evidence, they began to believe that somebody important was inside the car. Maybe they wanted that somebody important was inside the car to feel part of the situation. And this is probably also an example of how uncertain things are in our lives. Sometimes we believe things that are just gossip and have no evidence.
Septimus Warren Smith, who found himself unable to pass, heard him. Septimus Warren Smith, aged about 30, pale-faced, beak-nosed, wearing brown shoes and a shabby overcoat, with hazel eyes which had that look of apprehension in them which makes complete strangers apprehensive too. The world has raised its whip. Where will it descend? Everything had come to a standstill. The throb of the motor engine sounded like a pulse irregularly drumming through an entire body. The sun became extraordinarily hot because the motor car had stopped outside Mulberry's shop window. Old ladies on the tops of omnibuses spread their black parasols. Here a green, here a red parasol opened with a little pop. Mrs. Dalloway, coming to the window with her arms full of sweet peas, looked out with her little pink face pursed in inquiry. Everyone looked at the motor car. Septimus looked. Boys on bicycles sprang off. Traffic accumulated. And there the motor car stood, with drawn blinds, and upon them a curious pattern like a tree, Septimus thought, and this gradual drawing together of everything to one centre before his eyes, as if some horror had come almost to the surface and was about to burst into flames, terrified him. The world wavered and quivered and threatened to burst into flames. It is I who am blocking the way, he thought. Was he not being looked at and pointed at? Was he not weighted there, rooted to the pavement, for a purpose? But for what purpose? "Let us go on, Septimus," said his wife, a little woman, with large eyes and a sallow, pointed face, an Italian girl. But Lucrezia herself couldn't help looking at the motor car and the tree pattern on the blinds. Was it the Queen in there? The Queen going shopping? The chauffeur, who had been opening something, turning something, shutting something, got on to the box. "Come on," said Lucrezia. But her husband, for they had been married for 5 years now, jumped, started, and said, "All right," angrily, as if she had interrupted him. People must notice. People must see. People, she thought, looking at the crowd staring at the motor car. The English people, with their children and their horses and their clothes, which she admired in a way. But they were people now, because Septimus had said, "I will kill myself." An awful thing to say. Suppose they had heard him. She looked at the crowd. "Help! Help!" she wanted to cry out to butchers' boys and women. "Help!" Only last autumn she and Septimus had stood on the embankment, wrapped in the same cloak, and, Septimus reading a paper instead of talking, she had snatched it from him and laughed in the old man's face who saw them. But failure one conceals. She must take him away into some park. "Now we will cross," she said. She had a right to his arm, though it was without feeling. He would give her, who was so simple, so impulsive, only 24, without friends in England, who had left Italy for his sake, a piece of bone.
At this point, there is a shift. First we start with Mrs. Dalloway, then to the people outside the shop, and now the second character is introduced. Also, Septimus heard the noise. There's now a description of this man, about 30. His clothes show that he's not wealthy. He has poor clothes. How does he experience the situation? He believes that something dramatic has just happened, that the world has read his whip, is about to inflict a punishment. The only question is where he's going to fall. On which person? Will it be himself? You can see here that this man suffers paranoia. He has a sense of guilt, and he feels the world is against him. Now, after the sound of the car, everything has stopped, has come to a standstill. So for a moment, everybody is not moving. It's just waiting to understand what to do next. And also this is another moment. This is a collective moment of paralysis. So while all the other people in the street stood there waiting to know more, Septimus lived experienced the moment in a different way. It was like he was the center of attention. Everybody was looking at him, thinking how strange this man was. And he was like he was about to be judged by everybody else. And he was terrified inside himself. And so he believed maybe he was responsible for blocking, for having all those people, there still waiting. Were they pointing at him? Were they saying he was responsible? And now there is his wife, a sweet lady, who says, "Come on, Septimus, let's go. Let's not stay here." She insisted, come on, let's go. And Septimus says, oh, all right, okay, let's go. She has broken the spell in a way. She's Italian. She was born in Italy. She married 4 years before Septimus. So when she sees the people in the street, she thinks like these are English. Okay, so she doesn't feel English, completely English. So she has a detached way of seeing things. Now, she admires English society, the way they behaved, their clothes, but she's not happy because Septimus had confessed before that he wanted to take his life, to kill himself. What if the English, these respectable people, had heard him say that? She wanted to find help. She wanted to cry. She wanted help. But who could help her? She remembered that just 1 year before, Septimus had stood near the embankment, part of London, with the same cloak, reading the paper and talking. She needs to take him away from that street. So she takes his arm and to lead him away from where they are. Septimus decides, okay, he will do what she says because she's only 24 years old. She has no friends in England. And so, because she left Italy just to marry him, and so he will give her his arm just to keep on going, continue the day. Let's consider now the themes, that is the most important ideas that are present in the text. One of the themes is the contrast between the communication and the privacy. So both Clarissa and Septimus have an intense life inside themselves, but they struggle to find a way to communicate to the outside in a way that is comprehensible. People can understand what they really feel. Another theme is the threat of oppression. Imagine now the British society of the period, very conservative. You had to behave in an expected and conventional way. So there was a social pressure to do things in a certain way, to conform from a religious point of view, social point of view, and so on. And so they find it difficult to be themselves when they have to follow certain conventions. But see the motives, the recurring devices present in the story. One is time. Time, in modernism is experienced differently. It's subjective. It is every one of us experience time in a different way. Sometimes it is experienced like, very intense and short. Sometimes the same time it can be experienced, without an end, extended time. And this depends on the moment. Some moments are particularly intense. Instead of moving horizontally, they move vertically in intensity. In the first part of the novel, when Clarissa enters the florist's shop, she is overwhelmed by flowers, their variety, their beauty, and the feelings and emotions that they trigger into her. Let's see now the symbols. When the car stopped and made that loud noise, the people tried to find a meaning, to seek a meaning in that car. But Septimus is not interested in finding meaning. For him, all the outside reality is hollow, no meaning. For him, it's only important how he feels in that situation. So he's not expecting to find a meaning to his life from the outside. Basically, we have seen that story moves from the inside to the outside and again to the inside. And characters are represented using both internal and external perspective. We know the concept of epiphany in joy. Epiphany is a moment of manifestation. In Virginia Woolf, this moment, this intense moment, is called a moment of impulse. Both the epiphanies and the intensified moments of Virginia Woolf have some similarities but also differences. Basically, for Joyce, epiphany is a moment that is essential for the development of the story, for the plot. Instead, for Virginia Woolf, is not influential. It doesn't affect the development of the story, what's going to happen after that. No, it's just an intense moment where is lost. She experiences life at a higher level. using all her physical sensations, like we saw with the flowers. One final consideration, we've seen the difference between Italian Joyce, the style in Virginia Woolf. But personally, I think that the passage we saw today, the florist shop, shows a way of seeing things that is typical of a woman. Attention to details connected to emotion. While in Joyce, if you remember the end of the short story, The Death, his intense moment was about ideas, general ideas, conditions, reflections. It was not based on observation of a shop, things in a shop, detail, different kinds of colors. It was basically about the meaning of life. So probably these two writers show in their work a different way to represent their modern life, a new way to experience, describe their condition in the first part of the 20th century. Thank you.